Welcome everyone. Sorry I haven't been able to do any Warlocks brews lately. I've been prepping, or I was prepping for the Open down in Baltimore because it was nearby where I'm at. So that dedicated most of my time, and I was trying to figure out other software to fix the recording issue that I noticed. Someone had pointed out to me in one of the videos that the audio comes in weird. It turned out it was an AMD Relive issue regarding they don't record both sides of the audio for stereo. They only do one channel, so it only comes out one a year. So for people having trouble hearing, that's my apologies. And since then, I have installed, I think it's OBS is what I'm using now. But anyway, I digress. Um, long story short, went to the Open today, got rolled playing 8-rack. So it's a good time. I had fun, but ran into non-usual meta decks, and that kind of screwed with me a little bit. So I decided today, instead of doing a usual Warlock's Brew, we're going to do something a little bit different, and this is actually just going to be some Legacy. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a league with this, or if we're just going to do some pickup games in the queue. But anyway, I figured I'd do a deck tech and go from there. For anyone that's not familiar with this deck, the objective is to get your Grizzle Brizzles here into your graveyard and to reanimate them and go comboing off. This deck can win as early as turn 1 via lockout, usually involving Grizzlebrand and Sire of Insanity. And a lot of times, if you get Grizzlebrand out on turn 1, your opponent typically ends up scooping or something of that nature. So moving into the list, we've got, I'll start with the lands as I usually do. We got our bad lands, because this is a black-red deck primarily. We got Scrubland in here for sideboard tech. Got a couple basics and some fetches to fetch out said lands. You want to have the 4 Bloodstained Mires, just because, like in my case, I have the 1 mountain. Sometimes they'll run 3 bad lands. It depends on what you want to run. I figured I was on a slight budget, and I'll explain that a bit later. But yeah, so like this deck's a lot cheaper to build on mtgo because you can get, say, bad lands, for example, for a couple bucks as opposed to 90 is what they're going for in paper. So mtgo feels like the place to do Legacy. So yeah, you run the 13 lands, but you also have other ways to generate mana. You have your Lotus Petals that are 0-drop artifacts that if you sacrifice them, you can add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Usually to get to turn 1, you either need a Lotus Petal or a Dark Ritual in your opening hand, along with other fun effects. We have a 1 of Chrome Mox, which, as it reads, when it ETBs, you exile non-artifact, non-land from your hand, and then you can tap it to add mana of any color to your of that card's color to your mana pool. So say I exile a Faithless Looting to it, I can tap it for red. If I exile an extra Reanimate, although I'm having a bad day if I do that, I can tap it for black. So this deck has a few things. Like I said, you have the mana rocks effectively here, these guys. You also have the dark rituals here. If anyone doesn't know what dark rituals, there it is. It enables the entire deck for the most part, along with these. Because if you want to do this turn 1, because if you give them more time, you're probably going to lose. And then you have the enablers of getting things into your graveyard, like your Sires, like Chancellor, like Grizzle, like Tidespout, and Iona. You have your Entombs, which you basically dig through your library and put for a card and put in your yard, and then you shuffle. So ideally, you're just using this to get Grizzlebrand, because once you get Grizzlebrand out, you basically get a chance to do it twice or another time to try to get, say, Sire of Insanity or Chancellor out. You can Thoughtseize your opponent, which is an option, but more likely than not, you find yourself Thoughtseizing yourself. Usually you play a Dark Ritual, you have a Petal, you go Thoughtseize, targeting yourself. They know your hand, but it really doesn't matter if you're just going to combo out then and there. So you Thoughtseize yourself, you usually try to discard whatever's in your hand for a creature, and then reanimate them right after that. And then the last major enabler that I run in this deck is Faithless Looting, which is to draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. So it's a really good way to just sort of cycle through cards in your deck to try to dig through if something happened, you don't have your creature, or you don't have a way to discard it, like with the Entomb or Thoughtseize. I'm also running 3 collective brutalities because I'm not paying $35 effectively for unmasks right now at this time, but I really wanted to build this deck because it's a really funny deck. I usually run Eldrazi in paper, but I've been meaning to build Reanimator, and I was like, online seems like the place for Reanimator. And this is good just because you can discard a card to escalate and do a few other things here and there. Like I said, if you're running a more competitive list, you want unmasks as a 4-of, which is you can exile a black card from your hand instead of paying its mana cost. I can't remember if there's a life bit to it. And you target a player and you discard a card from their hand like a Thoughtseize, except it's effectively a free Thoughtseize without the 2 life even. But like I said, they're $35 on mtgo, which is about the same in paper. I think they might be a little bit more expensive in paper, so I'd rather not do that if I can avoid it, and I just want collective brutality because those are usually in the side. To get your creatures out, we have a playset of Reanimates. To just put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Keep in mind, you can also use Reanimate to grab one of your opponent's creatures. I did that with my opponent's Thalia when they were playing Death and Taxes the other day. It was funny as hell. We have Exhume. Each player puts a creature card from his or her graveyard onto the battlefield. This one comes with some risk, because if your opponent has a creature in their yard, they can bring that one back as well. And then lastly, you have Animate Dead, which is a wall of text that effectively just says, reanimate a card in your graveyard, throw this on there, and it has -1/-0. And if Animate Dead gets blown up, the creature dies as well. So now for the reanimation targets, like I said, you have Grizzlebrand. He's your main target. You have Sire of Insanity. In my mind, he's your secondary in a lot of games because if you get Grizzlebrand out and you start drawing 7 cards off the 7 life and you can do the combo again to get a Sire out, on turn 1, it's an insta-win because they basically just get blown out for the fact of they don't draw cards anymore. I don't know what's beeping. I think I have Discord open somewhere. Anyway. They're in complete top deck mode without a land even. You have Chancellors just because it helps deal with things like Force of Will on the opening turn. So if you have one in your opening hand, you just reveal it and it counters their first spell of the game. So if you go for a turn 1 combo, you can get around a potential Force of Will via that. And then when it's on it's also not a bad target to reanimate in general. It's a 5/6 body that is flying, so it's hard to kill, and it's got a beefy body, and it has that other countering clause just in general. It's force mana tithes, your opponent force spikes, and whatever you want to go with. Tidespout Tyrants is also neat because basically if you try to combo again, you're bouncing X amount of permanents depending on how many cards you have to cast for it, and it basically clears boards if you need to. And then lastly, for reanimation targets, we have Iona. Really, really good against monocolored decks. Really great against the mirror because you just reanimate Iona and name black. As you can see, most of the deck other than the lootings and the petals and moxes are black for things you're actually casting. So if you can turn 1 Iona against, say, another black-red reanimator, it's basically game. Moving on to the sideboard, again, I took some cuts for budget reasons. Normally you run a 4th Grizzlebrand in the sideboard, for example. I'm not. But for the most part, I try to keep it as close to what you usually would see. Here and there, I made some edits as I saw fit just for shigs and gigs. We got Blazing Archon that can come in for creature-heavy decks, so your creatures can't basically hit you if you're having trouble with creature flooding. Same thing with Elesh Norn. Say like elves, you can just drop it down, kills everything instantly. Anguilla Leviathan's great because it has Shroud and Island Walk, so if you're playing a blue deck and you get this one out, they basically can't do anything about it, and it has Trample as well as an added beef stick. I threw Tombstalker in more for shigs and gigs as well, because I figured in those matchups where they hate on your graveyard, they drop like, say, a Graph Diggers, and you don't have your Wear and Tears ready to go, or something that makes you can't do things out of the graveyard. You can at least use Tombstalker to delve things, so I was like, yeah, I like delve, it's funny. Surgical is more for the mirror or other decks that like to play things out of the graveyard, and other combo decks if you feel the need to Thoughtseize your opponent on that rare occasion, or collect a brutality your opponent. Fatal Push is just there because removal, although I don't think I'm ever siding this in. Again, it's more of just a placeholder for now because I had space. We got our Fairy Macabres. This is actually another one that's important for the mirror, and I actually put this in because of Eldrazi as well. Or rather, from my experience playing with Eldrazi with Macabres in the sideboard, really good against Reanimator, because if they go to Exhume, you can discard your Fairy Macabre to exile their targets for the Exhume, and then you get a Fairy Macabre as a result. So you get a free Fairy Macabre just for playing around their stuff. I like Pithing Needle. I think it's one of the most underrated sideboard cards in Magic in general. If I can fit a Pithing Needle into any deck, I usually try to. Just being able to name a card and making it unusable just feels good. And then you have 4 Wear and Tears because, and this is where the Scrubland comes in, because if they hose your graveyard or play a Chalice on 1, you basically die. So this is your way to deal with it. So you run 4 Wear and Tears in matches you expect a Chalice to come in, or you expect white-based graveyard hate to come in. Maybe they have a Leyline of the Void for whatever reason. And yeah, that's the gist of the deck. We're either tonight or tomorrow morning, whichever, because it's 10:30 right now, so it really depends on how I'm feeling and if I can actually find a game. We're probably just going to do some regular queuing up with more of the 1v1 heads-up matches for prizes and all that, just to play around with the deck. A little beat after getting my face beat in during the Open, but I figured I haven't done a video in a while, so I figured I'll do some Legacy. Why not? So I guess I'll just call this series Warlock's Legacy? Tentative title. Thanks for watching. I'm the MaroonWarlock, and I hope you enjoy the following vids.